Hey, friends, welcome back to another episode of your Hope Filled Perspective, where it's always our goal to restore hope, renew minds, and empower listeners to live in your God given identity. One thing I've learned is that when we go through painful, wounding trials, the enemy swoops in to attack our identity. That's when we hear the messages that we're not good enough, that we have messed up so much that we can't be forgiven, that nobody would understand, that how would God love us? All of those defeating messages. And one of our goals here is to help listeners live in their God-given identity. So what I'm hoping you're taking from this series is that nothing is too devastating to be healed in the hands of our good and redemptive God. So today I have another guest, but this episode is a little bit different. I've been interviewing people who have been sharing out of their own wounds, their own painful trials, and have gotten through to the point that they can look back and see how God formed a beautiful sacred scar. But today, I wanted to approach the sacred scars from a different perspective. So I've brought a friend of mine who is in the mental health field to talk to us from that perspective. My guest today is author Janell Rardon, who is a trauma-informed, board-certified life coach specializing in family systems. And her latest book, Stronger Every Day, 9 Tools for an Emotionally Healthy You. It helps bridge the gap between faith and mental health. Her newest title, Grandmother, is the greatest blessing in her life. And I love that because those of us who are very ministry minded, sometimes we get so busy in ministry that we forget our greatest area of ministry is in the home. So the fact that she enjoys being a grandmother blesses me. I'm going to put all the information about Janell, her resources, her books in the show notes that you can find at drmichelleb.com. But will you welcome with me to your hope-filled perspective, my friend, Janell Rardon.
Oh, Michelle, so happy to be here. So happy to talk about this subject, of course, and
You
grandmothering, but we'll talk about that another time.
Oh, yeah. You have welcomed me on your podcast several
You're my
times.
favorite.
I'm excited to have you here because you've experienced your own painful wounds, but we're not going to go there today.
No.
I want to talk to you as a mental health professional who really understands what pain can do to us. And friends, when I'm talking pain, if you haven't had the opportunity to read my last book, The Hem of His
Yeah.
Garment, Reaching Out to God When Pain Overwhelms, in that book, we talk about all the different types of pain: physical pain,
Yeah.
emotional pain, relational pain, financial pain, spiritual pain, grief and loss, as well as secondary pain, which is the pain that is
Yes.
inflicted on us by the words or actions of others or lack thereof, which makes us as pain sufferers feel even worse in the moment. I'm glad that you're here because I really value good, competent mental health professional because God didn't create us to go through these experiences alone.
No, no. I don't think he created us to go through them at all, but we do live in a fallen world.
That is true. And God doesn't cause our pain
Right.
and suffering, but how
Yeah.
many times in our pain do we
hmm
we call out and say, God, why did you allow this to happen?
Probably every time. I'm guilty of that, right? Like, why? This hurts so bad.
But what I have found, and I'd be curious to know if this is your experience too, working with clients all the time, is I've really never found the answer to that why to
hmm
be very helpful. It
Right.
wouldn't make me feel better if I had lost a child to know why they
No,
died, or to know
no.
why a spouse committed adultery, or to know
Mhm.
why I received a cancer diagnosis. The why doesn't really satisfy,
No.
but there are other
Mhm.
questions that are more helpful, and maybe we'll get into that later.
Yeah.
Even if we don't get into it, friends, I talk all about that in my latest.
Yes, you do.
Sacred Scars, trusting God's promise that your past is not wasted. So, Janelle, from
Mm.
your perspective, how would you frame the experience of a wound?
Ooh, it's such a deep question, and that pun was not intended.
But I love it.
It wasn't. A wound in my work in this when you watch my video, this is called the breathing room. This is my therapy room. This is where I bring clients to, or they come to me. A wound is something that disrupts. Okay. So you're moving along in life, and all of a sudden, I don't know, stub your toe on a door, it starts bleeding. Okay. If it's a physical wound, or just recently in a trip to Belgium, I had a man following behind me, screaming really horrible, ugly things to me. Didn't know him. So it was disruptive. I started having what we call somatic symptoms, stomach ache, feeling like I'm going to throw up. A wound disrupts. It stops you in your tracks, typically 99.9% of the time. It's going to take your breath away, jar you. Someone comes into the back of your car, right? It's something. So it's a jarring experience that disrupts forward motion, and it typically is going to cause some kind of pain.
Yes. Let's pause right there for a second because I think that's where sometimes there's a misunderstanding. The whole essence behind my book, Sacred Scars, is that we do have these jarring
Mm-hmm.
experiences. They
Mm-hmm.
interrupt the normal flow. They
They
might
do.
even interrupt our ability to cope, but it
Mm.
causes pain.
Causes pain.
Sometimes it's physical.
Mm-hmm.
Frequently, we can't even see it on the
That's
outside
correct.
because it's emotional or relational or
Mm-hmm.
spiritual.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not the same as a scar. A scar is actually
Correct.
a healed wound.
Oh,
So
yeah. The worst kind.
the scars don't erase the pain from the wound, but
Mm-mm.
they don't allow that pain to take up the same real estate anymore because it's healed.
Correct. But I immediately, when you said that, Michelle, I went to a mental, emotional, relational wound that scars over and causes scar tissue. Because if you've ever had an operation, and scar tissue is not normally a good thing. So I immediately went to, when you said it heals over and it leaves a scar, I was like, ugh, like my whole body posture just, because in my work, the scarred over places are typically bringing over so much pain still. They're not healed and they're not visible.
Right?
So then it takes the eye and ear and the heart of someone who's so, I'm going to say trained,
Mhm.
but we could say discerning, wise, given to creating a safe space in which that person can come in and take a look at that scar,
Yes.
because it's invisible. So you have to have a keener sense of a
Mhm.
spiritual stethoscope, in a sense.
Yes. Oh, I love that phrase, spiritual stethoscope.
Yeah.
The interesting juxtaposition, if you will, that the book Sacred Scars, though, helps people understand is that we as humans who hurt,
Mhm.
but who are also susceptible to the lies of the enemy.
Yes,
Satan is called the father of lies,
he really is.
also called the accuser of the brethren. And
Mhm.
that's a fancy term for basically saying he's constantly whispering in our ears, trying to tell us that we're not lovable, we can't be forgiven, we have no value, no worth, we're useless, we don't have a purpose,
You
and
deserved that.
you
You
deserve that.
deserved that.
Yes,
It's good for you.
right.
Just a
So
few things said to me.
I've had a tendency in the past to look at my scars as an ugly reminder of
Mm,
the pain I've gone through. But for
yes.
those who will pick up a copy of Sacred Scars, what if they will read all the way through? My hope is that they get to the part where they can look at their scars no longer with disdain,
Yes.
but as something beautiful that shows that they have overcome.
And I would add, because you write so beautifully about it, there's no shame to that scar.
Right.
That's where the title to me was so majestic. We're so shamed by our scars typically. And yet you brought to the table this beautiful mental shift. If we can make that mental shift from it being shameful or shaming to sacred,
Yes.
wow, then we have won the victory.
Yes.
Right? We are no longer now allowing, because I say that shame is liar's language. That is, lie, call him liar. That's what he is. That's who he's been in my life. And grace, is the language of love. And so if we're filtering this entire work and conversation through a Father God who loves us, then he's the one who will help us get from a shaming place to a sacred place. He's
Yes.
the only way.
And he is the one who did that for me. If I'm being very
Mm,
vulnerable and
please
transparent,
be.
especially about my physical scars,
Hmm.
I went through a serious life-threatening illness when I was 3, and I'm sure most of my listeners have already heard that story. And if you've read
Hmm.
any of my books, you've already read about the story. But the brief version is that it caused major disfigurement. My right leg is 2 inches shorter than my left leg, so I walk with a limp that's noticeable to everybody. I have
Mm.
one leg that looks like a peg leg, and
Mm.
that foot is half the size of my other foot, and it looks like the feet of the Asian women that have been bound so
And
that they
bound,
don't
yes.
grow beyond a certain size. So it looks like an upside down V, which makes it
Mm.
next to impossible to find shoes to wear.
I would, that's just that story. Never stop telling that story because you are a living, breathing testament. Is that the right word? Or majestic witness of what we just talked about? Because I know that you have had to move from that being shameful to that being sacred. How'd you do that? Can I ask you?
Yes. And that is what prompted the writing of this book, Sacred
Mhm.
Scars,
Mhm.
because even until a year or two before I started writing the book, I was so ashamed of those physical scars.
That's a big deal as any
Yes.
for anyone, but for a woman,
Yes. Yes, because of that deformed foot, I don't wear pretty shoes. They don't make
Mhm.
pretty shoes for a foot that is formed that way. And
Yeah.
I've heard the Bible verse that we are fearfully and wonderfully made, and that is true. But because this is something that happened to me after birth,
Yeah.
I could not fathom
Yeah.
how God could find that deformity beautiful and wonderful.
Yeah. And then you find it that way. And then
I
a
couldn't.
future husband, yeah.
I listened to the enemy, who, by
Mm,
the way, used my peers on the elementary school playground to
worse.
convince me that it was ugly.
Yeah.
So
The
what brought,
cruelest audience.
oh, for sure.
Cruelest. Hmm.
But what brought about the healing for me to a place where I can look at those scars now, not with disdain, but to realize that they've served a beautiful purpose, is
Mm,
when I was reading over the resurrection story.
mm.
Jesus was nailed to a cross.
Oh,
Spikes
yes.
went through his hands and his feet, and he was killed.
He
But
was.
when he rose again and he appeared to his disciples, he still had the scars in his hands and feet.
Fascinating, right?
Well, I wrestled with that, Janelle,
Yeah. Why would he?
because
Yeah.
we read in scripture that when we go to heaven, we are going to have
Yes.
new glorified bodies. It was
Right. And
just
you're like, I
almost
better
like,
not have this
yay,
foot.
I am going to wear stiletto heels in heaven because I've never been able to here on earth, right? So I, in my humanness, pictured Jesus in this new glorified body without those scars. And when I really pressed into the Lord and said, what's the deal with Jesus still
Yeah,
having his
what's up with
scars?
this?
It was because when he approached his disciples, those scars, particularly to Thomas, the one that is frequently referred to as doubting Thomas. Thomas is like, oh no, I'm not going to believe that's my Jesus. Prove it.
That's right. Prove
So
it.
Jesus showed his scars to Thomas, not just showed them, but said, touch them and see that it is me. So those scars on our Savior's body
Mm.
prove that he was who he said he was and that
Mhm.
he did what he said he would do.
Mhm.
And that to me is a beautiful thing. It was in that realizing, Even Jesus, who is God,
Hmm.
has scars that serve a purpose.
Hmm.
Our scars in the hands of the same God serve a beautiful purpose. That was such a light bulb
It's a
revelate
massive
holy
paradigm
revelation.
shift. And can I say this? I just have to say it. So to your audience, who I'm guessing I can call them hope fillers, because it's hope filled.
Right?
I'm a heart lifter. My community are heart lifters. So hope fillers, heart lifters. That, Dr. Michelle, Dr. B, is why we love you and why you, through all of this journey of pain since you were 3, do what you do, and why we need the words that you pen and click and write through the pain, because your insights, just like this insight with Jesus on the cross and Thomas, I mean, that to me takes my breath away in all the most beautiful ways, because those scars, when Jesus came back, they didn't identify Jesus in a way that was shameful. They identified him in a way that, this is me.
Yes.
Here, look, Thomas, touch, feel. And so to me, I can offer that to anyone in my life, that, listen, I've lived through that. And here are my scars,
Yeah.
and maybe you can find some hope in that.
Yeah. Yes. That
That
is
helps me. Maybe not in my darkest hour where I'm actually being forged.
right.
In my darkest hour, it's going to be about me and my Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit healing that wound. But then when I come back out into the light and into my spheres of influence, it's the hope of this book, it's the hope of the work you do, that readers and listeners will also have that kind of, we'll call it a brain shift, right? A mental shift, an emotionally healed shift, that, okay, the scar might look physically ugly, but it is kind of like kintsugi, the Japanese art
Yeah.
form, where something's broken and the master puts the gold lacquer in and it becomes more valuable.
That's right.
That's our goal. That's the goal of this book. It's the goal of the work that you do.
Well, let's go there for a minute.
Okay.
What do you see as a professional that most prevents people from seeking healing for whatever their wound is, whether it's visible or it's invisible to the eye? What
Mm-hmm.
most prevents people from seeking out healing?
I think predominantly there are 3 things. This is how I categorize it. I'm getting ready to celebrate 13 years in private practice of doing this work, studying, researching. It's pride in the sense that, I got this. I got this. I don't need any help. I'll buck up. Would you call that pride? I think it's pride. Second would be shame, for sure. I think shame's, a master driver of this. Like, what if somebody knows?
That's why I hid my scars. That's why I would wear long pants and boots
Mhm.
that would hide my feet because of
Mm.
shame.
Wow. Mm.
Okay, so pride first, shame. What's the
I
third?
want to sit there for a minute and talk about that, but we won't. Fear, for sure, right? I'm just so afraid. I recently needed to go back to therapeutic help again, and I've only been 3 times, but I'll remember the first ride, and I live in Virginia, so there's lots of tunnels and bridges because we have lots of water, which is wonderful. But I was going through the tunnel and I'm like, just turn around. You got this. Okay, there's the pride. You help you got this. My husband will even say, you know how to do this. And I'm like, well, I might know, but I am not doing well right now.
Yeah, it feels different when it's us, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's real personal. Really don't like that. Yeah, that's another reason. It's getting all up in your business and making you uncomfortable. So discomfort would be a
Mhm.
beautiful 4th reason, Michelle, actually. Discomfort. It's very uncomfortable. And I started getting nervous. See, I just had to take a deep breath. I could feel the anxiety. Oh, I don't want to go bare my soul again. Do I have to do this again? So I think that it's a whole bunch of reasons, and then it just takes a whole bunch of courage to admit that I need some help here. And for those of us who are faith followers, I'm a woman of faith. I consider myself a very strong woman in my faith. And yet, asking for help, being vulnerable, maybe confessing even private, shameful things, it's just none of that's comfortable. And in the world that I lived in as a performer on stage and dance, I learned how to put it on real good. I can smile and dress real pretty, and you'd never know anything's wrong. So I think that all of those things, probably all of them combined, they probably all have a little part of the problem of why someone won't pick up their phone or go onto the computer and make that appointment and then be brave enough to actually walk across the threshold into a helper's space. That might be a close friend. Doesn't have to be a therapeutic alliance, but hopefully it's someone, like we said earlier, a wise, discerning person who creates a safe space for you to just be you.
And I think one of the things that I know many of my patients, as a board certified clinical neuropsychologist, have thought is, what will they think about me if
Oh, yeah.
me?
Oh, yeah.
I've never had the chance to say this on the program before, but Janell, I know you'll agree with me. As the mental health professional who wants to help you, can I just tell you, nothing surprises us anymore.
Nothing, not one thing.
Not one
No.
thing.
Okay,
We
maybe a little bit.
all.
It still takes my breath away.
Well,
You
part of
know,
that is because we hurt for them. We
we
don't
do.
want them to hurt.
No,
It's not that we're shocked and we're thinking bad about them. We're just like,
not one bit.
oh,
No, no,
I'm
no. I'm so proud. I'm always like, yes,
right.
you did it. You brought it out
Yes.
into the light.
Yes.
You opened the door of the skeletons that are hiding away in your shame closet. And
Yes.
you were so brave. You put your hand on the doorknob, you turned the door, you opened it, because once we let the light in, shame has to flee.
Yes. And it
So,
does. And that's what I've seen with patients over years and years of walking people through. Nobody comes into my office because life's going well, ever.
no, not that office. I don't want to walk in your office,
So
but I will if I need to.
when people come in and they share their greatest heartache, their darkest secrets, once
Pains.
they share, you can see the relief flood over them. Like,
Yeah.
oh
Oh,
my
yeah.
goodness, the worst thing didn't happen.
Exactly. And I'm still sitting here and she's still accepting me. It's I love that moment. I can feel it.
And feel it.
I can feel it, and it just makes my whole body so happy for that individual. Yeah. And then you see peace start to
Yes.
a peace that does pass their understanding, because most people in those situations, myself included, have no idea what that peace feels like. So, yeah.
So we are encouraging you to not walk this journey alone.
No.
You find a trusted, wise, knowing individual who can
Hmm.
walk with you.
Yes.
But I want to
Right
turn
next
our
to you.
conversation now to what are, from your perspective, what are some of the key steps or activities that really people need to do to heal from these wounds?
Michelle, they're the simplest. And I think that's where I am in my own journey now, and where I'm probably even shifting the work that I do, in that the simplest are the most natural, let light in, number one. However, wherever you can find it. For me, I'm a knitter. I love going to my little knitting shop. The minute I open that door and I see a group of women sitting in a circle, just gabbing and knitting away, I'm like, I want to be one of them, because I still am a knit, purl, don't really know. But I feel a rush of like happiness. Okay. So that's me. I love nature. So I just decided to join our botanical garden, and I've signed up for a ton of classes, to go this upcoming few months. Whatever, however, it might be surfing. It could be a myriad of things that bring you a sense of equanimity, is what we call that in the world of mental and emotional health. It's that feeling of homeostasis. Let me say, just that feeling of, I'm just feeling peaceful right now. What is that? Curling up and reading a great novel, playing the piano, learning how to play the guitar, planting plants. I just put a bunch of bird feeders because I love birds. We get caught up, I think, many times with we have to do some theoretical something, but just return to the garden. We were created in a garden, and that garden where God put Adam and Eve, I believe, just symbolizes peace,
Mhm.
a quieter life, a simpler way of living, a cancellation of a whole lot of noise that's unnecessary. There's many, many different small shifts that can be made, but I overall would just say, however you can get light, get light, get it into your being.
Pain is so overwhelming.
It
Any
is.
kind of pain, physical, emotional, any kind
Hmm.
of pain.
Yep.
What I hear you saying is, it, even in our pain,
Hmm.
perhaps more so in our
Hmm.
pain, we need to do what we can do to help de-stress,
Hmm.
stop the
That's
flood of
correct.
cortisol.
Yes.
Cortisol is that naturally occurring chemical that God gave us to be able to fight or flight in an emergency. But the problem
That's right.
is that when we don't get healing, our brain continues to think we're in a state of emergency.
That's correct. And I
And
deal,
it,
that's mostly what I deal with. Yes.
yes, and we were not intended to run on a constant dump of cortisol. That's why we have people who are experiencing things like adrenal failure.
Yes.
So what I hear you saying, and I'm just using a different word, is take time to play, because play
Yes.
de-stress.
Yes. Yes, 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 in little spurts because I'm always in pain. So it's like you come to a point where, okay, I need to lay down for an hour and then I can go take a walk. Some days it will be I'll walk to the corner and I'll come back, but I'm outside. I'm looking at the trees. I'm looking at, beautiful things. So yes, anything and everything that you can do to catch your breath.
And if you are one who's listening today and you're enduring
Hmm.
significant pain in
Hmm.
any of the areas,
Hmm.
can I just encourage you, as someone who is very driven, who sets very high expectations of,
You sure do.
so can I encourage you, because I'm learning it too, to extend as much grace to yourself as you would extend to your best friend?
Yes.
It's so hard for me to do that because I have very high expectations, but extend yourself some grace that this is as much as I can do today. Tomorrow,
Hmm.
maybe I'll do a little more. Maybe I'll do a little,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it's okay. What I
It
have,
really
when
is.
it comes to extending grace, that's kind of a intangible concept. So what I have to remind myself of, and this helps me extend grace, is that God did not create us as human doings.
Mhm.
God created us as human beings.
That's right.
And sometime in our pain, we can't do. So take the
No,
time just to be.
just be. Be still. Oh, it's so hard,
Oh,
but you can do it. You can do it.
yes,
You can do it. We can learn that principle and that
baby,
practice.
baby
Okay.
steps.
Baby steps.
Now, what if we have listeners who their area of greatest pain is relationship pain?
Oof.
Maybe it's betrayal, maybe it's infidelity, maybe it's broken trust, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Their wound has
Yeah.
come from relationships.
Hmm.
What we know is that sometimes in relationship wounds, there may never be
Hmm.
reconciliation.
Correct.
So, how do our listeners move forward if they're experiencing relationship pain when the other party might never want to repair that? How do they
Hmm.
heal from that?
I have personally found that I work with family systems. So that's where I find great challenge, great pleasure, but also have seen great, great pain because we all want a happy family. We
Right?
all want a good mama, good daddy, good sibling relationships, particularly just talking in the family realm. And I think the answer that I come to find is in those cases where it seems impossible, the level of betrayal, the level of difficulty, the greatest work being done is in you. So I will always applaud any human being who will work on healing themselves. Make the work about yourself. Do the work on you, because we can't control any other person. We can't fix anybody, but we can, I don't like that word fix. We can commit to becoming whole people ourselves. Now, that might mean being in a therapeutic alliance with someone, a spiritual director, companions, friends, small groups. Sometimes we have to have other people hold up our arms and get us through. These are painful situations. There's not an easy formulaic do A, then do B, and C will happen. But in the end, one of the wisest things that was ever taught to me was by a Dr. Bruce and Tony Hebel, and it was live from a state in your life of pre-forgiveness.
Oh, say that again.
Live and move and have your being in the state and a practice of pre-forgiveness. So it's taken me a while to wrap my head around that, but I feel as though in implementing that, that looks like, okay, I have a really difficult situation with a sibling, let's say. I'm just going to be moving like I feel like Jesus Christ himself must have moved in a state of pre-forgiveness, which just means somebody is, going to be human and hurt me. Now, we're not talking about abuse.
No, 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 no.
That's a different scenario. We cannot stand for that. But we're just talking about someone who particularly picks on you or just offends you all the time or demeans you or those situations. If you can live first in your own wholeness, and that's what your books are helping us do, is to understand what that looks like and understand how to move into that kind of posture in our life, and then live and move and breathe through our life in a state of pre-forgiveness. Like the man wailing behind me in Belgium,
Right.
I was able to just go, he's not well. He's just not well. This is not my problem. Not my monkey, not my circus. It's just not my problem. And, God help me protect myself and stand up for me, but also just, you know, not give him permission to get into my
Yeah.
brain.
One of the first times that I ever came to understand this concept of pre-forgiveness was when I read a book by Cynthia Rookti. It's called Spouse in the House.
Oh,
And it talked about her adjustment when her spouse retired and was all of a sudden in her space all the time.
oh
And
boy.
how what was previously a pearl of a relationship now felt like sandpaper all the time, you
I
know?
better get that book.
Oh, yeah, and listen to the podcast episode where she and I
I
talked about
will.
it, but I was just beginning the empty nest situation, and my spouse was in my
Yes.
space all the time, and she talked about what saved her marriage basically was understanding this concept of I'm just going to pre-forgive him instead
Wow.
of waiting until I picked up an offense and then had to
Yes.
wrestle with it. And then I
Mm-hmm.
offended him because I said hurtful words out of my hurt. And that has helped me to utilize that pre-forgiveness with other people
Mm-hmm. Yes.
and to remember that everybody is hurting from something.
They
And
are
hurt people hurt
hurt
people.
people. They do. But
So
that will begin. I want to reiterate because I think it's really important, and this. That work starts in our own heart
yeah.
because that's maturity. It's becoming spiritually mature. It's just becoming a mature person with really healthy behavior patterns and really healthy communication skills. It starts there. You have to know who you are. You have to know whose you are. You have to know I have value, worth, and dignity, and you treating them that way is not okay. So, many of my sacred scars are because I didn't know who I was and I allowed people to mistreat me
Mhm.
and I received it. and allowed it to oppress my sense of self. So if we don't walk away with anything today, it's that our sacred scars, the foundation of that, a part of that, a huge part of that is getting to know who we are. And I have come to know myself in the darkest nights of my soul. And I now, not then, can be grateful. But at the end of the day, I can only take care and nurture and mature my own heart.
There are a couple of books that significantly impacted me earlier in my marriage. You know,
Mm.
when we're dating and when we're engaged, everything is wonderful and we're both
Hunky
putting on our
dory.
best face. And then you get married and you come home from the honeymoon and all of a sudden these things just bug. But this,
Remember going, he's not leaving.
right. What did I just sign up for? Right.
He's still
But,
here.
but this is, friends, this, I promise you, this is applicable not just in marriage. It's applicable
Yes.
in other relationships. But Kevin Leman wrote a book, Have a New Husband by Friday, and Elizabeth George wrote a book, Lord
Ooh,
Save Me.
yeah.
But both the essence of both books is exactly what Janelle is saying, in that
Mhm.
we cannot change another person, but
No.
we can work on our own healing and our own wholeness and wellness,
Hmm.
and that will overflow into
Hmm.
other people's lives. That's the
It's
essence of
miraculous.
the book
It,
is.
yeah, and those are classic books. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
but they're classic for a reason
Oh,
because
for sure.
they work.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
but when we're hurt, that
Hmm.
can be a really hard place to go because we're hurt and we want
Hmm.
revenge, or we want the other person to
Yeah.
seek our forgiveness.
We want justice. Many of us, our
Yeah.
personality types are, I want justice. And so I think going back just quickly, when we talked about what prevents someone from going into therapy is that they are so filled with wanting revenge that starting with yourself, starting with your own heart seems like the really wrong thing to do. That's the biggest mind shift that I have to work with personally is just, helping someone understand and let go of control and like, oh, I mean, I just had a session yesterday and all we talked about was revenge. You know, I just want revenge. I'm like, I know, I bet you do. I would too. It's a natural thing to want, but it's really detrimental. So I think that it's so powerful to today in this conversation to go, okay, I am going to make my scars sacred and I'm going to start with me.
Yes. Yes.
I don't know what that looks like. I don't know how, but I'm going to just open my hands. Yeah, I know you've been here a million times.
Mhm.
Help me, God. I just prayed that in my car today on the way to a doctor visit. Would you please just
All
help
that's
me help
needed.
myself?
Yes, that's all that's needed.
It's
Help
it.
me, God.
Help me help myself. Because now I need to help myself. I need to make changes that I know I need to make, but I can't help myself. So help me help myself because we're wise people.
Revenge comes when
Ooh,
we are so deeply hurt.
yeah.
We want someone else to hurt as bad as we do so that they can understand our pain.
Mhm.
It won't ever happen. Two
No.
people can go through infidelity, two people can go through
Mhm.
prodigal child, two people can go through cancer, but their experience is still totally different. But I believe
Yes.
that's why God says in his word, vengeance is mine.
It is only his.
It's only his.
He's big enough. He's got all the wherewithal, the capacity, and he knows, he is the only one. So we want to be people who I want to be, let me just talk for me, live the words of sacred scars so that I can truly, truly live a fulfilling, meaningful, purposeful life. And that is the only way. The only way is to take care of my own heart. It's the only way.
We will never fully heal as long as we are harboring bitterness,
Never.
resentment. and unforgiveness. And may
Mhm.
I say, not just towards other people,
Mhm.
towards ourselves.
Oh, for sure. I'm so
Sometimes
hard on myself.
we are we are the hardest person for us to forgive.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Yes.
let, let's shift and
Whew.
talk a little bit more hopeful here, because that was really heavy and
That
hard.
is hopeful, though.
It
It's so
is.
hopeful, Dr.
It
Michelle.
is.
It is the hope because it's where the work is done and no
Yes.
one's talking about it, and you are talking about it. We're not glossing over it. We're not bypassing it.
No,
You're
this is
saying this is where the rubber meets the road, folks.
yes. But
Do the
you
work.
and I both know that at about this minute mark in
Yeah.
therapy,
Yeah.
we have to help kind of close up the
Of
wound
course.
to
Yes.
allow our patients to,
Some light.
yes. So I would love it as a professional if you would share how you've seen some people experience good from their scars.
Hmm. Wow. That's like there's so many. Thankfully. Thankfully.
Yes.
Thankfully. I think one of the most beautiful pictures, obviously I will change names and
No, we're not
do
asking
some fictional work, but there was oh,
confidentiality.
yeah, of course, a woman with some age on her, who I first met in the COVID era time in her car at night in the freezing cold under a lamp, like a street lamp. And she was so broken, broken beyond broken. Somehow got my number. Friend shared it, I think. And I just remember continuing to look and go, how did that lovely, beautiful, smart woman end up in that place? Freezing to death in a car under a street lamp with nowhere to go. Flash forward through a lot of her hard hurt work, as I would call it. She was sitting in this space, and in the middle of a session, we were doing some work, and she leaned back and she just exhaled after weeping and weeping. And it was like the color started to come, like I could physically see this transformation in front of my eyes. And all the pain and the wrinkled pain and all the pain just came into this peaceful countenance. And she looked over at me and she said, I don't know what this is. I don't know. I don't know. What am I feeling? She didn't know.
Right.
She didn't know. And I said, well, it looks like peace. Oh, oh. I said, okay, just put your hands over your heart. You just stay there and I mean, it gives me chills to think about it. Just allow it to soak from the top of your head to the bottom of your feet like oil on Aaron's beard in Psalm 133. Just let it soak over you. I don't want you to move until you feel it in your bones. And that's been my personal marker in the work or how I will live. Like, if I can be of any use to any human being to help them find their way to that,
Mhm.
take me home, Jesus.
Absolutely.
Because she couldn't find that on her own, but yet, her willingness to pick up her phone, take a chance, call a number a friend had given her, brave, because this was a proud, talented, smart woman who somehow found herself in a very dark, hard place. She took a deep breath. She got a lot of courage. And I would say in that moment, Michelle, as we're talking, now that you have, because your book wasn't out then, of course, or it would have been in her hands the next minute. I watched her shameful scars turn into sacred scars.
Yes.
I did, right in front of my eyes.
Mhm. And that's what God wants to do
Mhm,
with all of our pain. It is
mhm,
the enemy who brings guilt, shame, remorse,
mhm.
condemnation. That is never, never,
No.
never God's way.
No.
But He's also not going to pry open the
Mm-mm.
recesses of your heart.
No.
Loves us too much to be a slave driver.
Yeah,
He
he's invitational for
is
sure.
invitational. That's why his word says, call unto me,
Yes.
and then I will answer you. And sometimes he answers through a trusted mental health professional like Janelle
Hmm.
or myself. Sometimes he answers through a spiritual director or a
Yeah.
mentor or a wise friend or a pastor. God is not, he's not interested in cookie cutter healing of our heart.
No, I've had a deli manager come around and hug me. And I tell you to this day, she was an angel. God will bring the teachers. He will bring the wisdom to you. What he can't turn away from is like that woman's broken heart. He says he won't. He draws near to the brokenhearted. He
Yes.
can't. That's something he can't do. He can't turn away from a God, please help me.
Well, and he loves us so much, and he honors our pain. Scripture
Hmm.
says he collects our tears in a bottle.
Beautiful
I
bottle.
cannot wait to that day when I'm in heaven and I see what beautiful thing he's used those tears for, because
Ooh.
God is a redemptive God. So
Hmm.
there's some redeeming purpose for those tears, and I can't wait to see it.
I know. I
He's
bet your
just,
jar will be teal. It'll be so
oh, I
pretty.
hope so. I hope so. And I actually hope that my tears are like diamonds on the water,
No, they are. I know they are. I'm so sure of it.
because that brings me peace. So
It's beautiful.
I don't really know, friend, what he does with our tears, but I do know
I
that
know.
he
He
considers
collects
them
them.
with honor. They
Mhm.
are sacred to God.
And so
And
are our scars.
you might be in a place right now and you think, I, I'm listening, I'm hearing, is it really possible? And
Yeah.
Janelle and I combined have decades of mental health experience to tell you
Yes, we sure do.
it
It
is.
is. It
It
won't feel it in the time. Just remember that.
is right.
But you keep on keeping on and you keep crying one more tear and looking for the light and apply all the beautiful principles and practices that we are hopefully offering to you. They are hope filled.
But that is a chapter in my book, Sacred Scars, is feel it to heal it.
That's right.
And
You
then
have
there's
to.
another chapter, shame off you.
That's correct.
Too often we hear the opposite. We hear shame on you.
Oh, yes.
God says, shame off you.
Yes.
So, Janelle,
Yes.
if a listener is tuning in today and they're listening in on our conversation and something is resonating in their spirit, what hope-filled perspective do you want to leave them with today?
You're not alone. You're
Mm.
just not alone. You will feel alone. You will feel lonely. The dark night of the soul that we're talking about, where these scars are being made sacred, are dark, lonely, pain filled, usually, but you're not alone. That will be one of the greater lies that you will be told. In fact, that was told to Job, one of the greatest in the
Yes.
beautiful book we know as the Bible. But you're not. And so that's why you, Michelle, do what you do. It's why I do what I do. And if you're in one of those dark spaces, pull out this podcast, put it in your ear. Michelle, one of the greatest healers for me is music. And I know it's important to you as well. And you have offered so many beautiful pieces in this book, playlist and pieces of music. And I think music is it's a healer. So take advantage, I would say, of all that you have at your fingertips through this online presence that we have in the world today. And if you're feeling lonely, never, ever, ever be afraid to ask for help.
And in the middle of the night, when the pain often seems
Mm,
the worst, and
hmm.
I'm talking from personal as well as professional experience, you might be thinking, she said I'm never alone. but there's nobody here to help me. But that
Exactly.
is a lie from the pit of hell, because
Hmm.
God is only ever a whisper away. He's
Oh,
right there. His presence is there. But
it
when
is.
you call unto him, he promises he
Hmm.
will answer. I
Yes. And
hope
that's,
that something in today from two mental health professionals has let you know that you're not alone. We see you. We
mm-hmm.
validate your pain. We honor
Yes.
the experience that you've gone through, but we're
Hmm.
also here to encourage you that you don't have to stay there.
No,
Healing
no.
is possible, and God can redeem your most painful experience and
Hmm.
create a beautiful, sacred scar.
Amen.
Janelle, I'm so glad that you have come on the podcast today to share out of your own experience, both personally and professionally. And
Mm.
if our listeners want to find out more about you and about your resources, about your
Mm.
amazing book, where can they do that?
Heart Lift Central. It's that easy. Heartliftcentral.com at Heartlift Central. Either one of those will take you right to all of the free resources and encouragement you need. Please let me heart lift you. Please.
Yes, make sure that you tune in to Janelle's podcast. Janelle, where can they find your podcast?
Anywhere you listen to a podcast, Apple, heartliftcentral.com, Spotify, anywhere you can listen to a podcast. If not, go to my website, heartliftcentral.com. It's
Yeah.
right there, waiting for you.
We will put all the information about Janelle and her resources in our show notes that you can find at drmichelleb.com. We've got over a decade worth of free resources,
We really do.
just between the two of us,
I
probably
think we have more than a decade.
yeah. Yeah, I've got like 15 years myself. And then Janelle's got
Yes.
free resources for you. So please,
Yeah.
please, please avail yourself of them.
Yes.
We haven't
Yes.
created them for ourselves.
No. Mm-mm.
Friends, I hope that something in this series, but specifically something today in my conversation with Janella, has encouraged your heart, has
Hmm.
heart
Hmm.
lifted you, as is,
And hope filled you. Hmm.
or filled you with hope. And maybe you're not in a situation where you're
Right.
dealing with pain right now. And if you're not, praise God and enjoy
Oh, yes.
period, because you are either in pain now, you've just come out of pain, or you will end up going in pain. Or maybe you're walking alongside a friend or family member who
Hmm.
needs a biblically based, hope-filled perspective. Would you
Correct.
consider sharing this episode so that they
Mhm.
too can be encouraged? And while you're at it, would you consider rating and reviewing this podcast, because that helps other people find this resource? I'm looking forward to continuing another hope-filled conversation with you next week. Until then, it's my prayer for you that you have a hope-filled week.